Currency swaps are derivative agreements in which two counterparties exchange cash flows denominated in different currencies. Unlike interest rate swaps, currency swaps typically involve the exchange of notional principal amounts at both the beginning and end of the contract. The primary purpose of a currency swap is to allow each party to obtain financing in a foreign currency at a potentially lower cost than would be available directly in international capital markets. These contracts help corporations, financial institutions, and governments manage foreign exchange exposure, reduce funding costs, and match the currency composition of assets and liabilities while maintaining flexibility in global financing strategies. A typical currency swap begins with an initial exchange of principal amounts based on the prevailing spot exchange rate. During the life of the contract, each party pays interest on the currency it has received and receives interest on the currency it has provided. Interest payments may be fixed for fixed, fixed for floating, or floating for floating depending on the contract structure. At maturity, the original principal amounts are exchanged back at the predetermined exchange rate established at inception. This feature distinguishes currency swaps from most interest rate swaps and allows participants to hedge both interest rate and foreign exchange risks simultaneously. The pricing and valuation of currency swaps rely on the principle that the present value of expected cash inflows must equal the present value of expected cash outflows at initiation. Valuation requires discounting each currency's future cash flows using the appropriate yield curve and then converting values into a common currency using the prevailing exchange rate. After initiation, changes in interest rates and exchange rates affect the swap's value. A party benefits when the currency it expects to receive appreciates relative to the currency it must deliver. Consequently, currency swaps are sensitive to both cross-border interest rate differentials and foreign exchange market movements. Currency swaps provide numerous practical benefits for multinational organizations. Companies often use them to finance foreign operations, hedge exchange rate exposure, or gain access to more attractive borrowing markets. For example, a corporation may borrow in its domestic market where it enjoys a comparative borrowing advantage and then use a currency swap to obtain the foreign currency needed for overseas investments. This strategy can reduce borrowing costs while managing exchange rate risk. Because currency swaps facilitate efficient allocation of capital across international markets, they play an important role in global corporate finance and international investment management. Equity swaps are derivative contracts in which one party exchanges the return on an equity asset, portfolio, or stock index for another stream of payments, typically based on a fixed interest rate, floating interest rate, or another equity return. The equity return leg generally includes both capital gains or losses and any dividends generated by the underlying equity position. Unlike direct stock ownership, equity swaps allow investors to gain or reduce exposure to equity markets without purchasing or selling the underlying securities. This flexibility makes equity swaps valuable tools for portfolio management, risk control, and investment strategy implementation. The valuation of an equity swap is based on the present value of the expected future cash flows associated with each leg of the contract. The equity payer benefits when the underlying equity asset underperforms relative to the financing leg, while the equity receiver benefits when the equity asset generates superior returns. Portfolio managers frequently use equity swaps to obtain market exposure efficiently, implement tactical asset allocation decisions, or hedge existing positions. Because equity swaps require little initial capital compared with direct investment, they can enhance portfolio flexibility and leverage. Together, currency swaps and equity swaps demonstrate how derivative contracts can be used to transfer risk, improve financing efficiency, and achieve specialized investment objectives within global financial markets.